Hello and welcome everybody to our 10th edition, our 10th episode of Triggered and True. Can you believe it's been 10 episodes already, Laura?
Wow. I actually didn't know it was 10. That's great.
And the funny thing is, as I was thinking about this, it's taken us 10 episodes to get to what we're going to talk about today, which is kind of the gold, which
Hmm.
is kind of what this is all about.
Yeah, it's
And
exciting.
and I was thinking, why today we're going to be talking about our true self. And when I say this is kind of the gold, this is what we've been really going towards the whole time with all of our previous 9 episodes, to kind of help us get to this point where we can really discover who we really are. So one of the things I was thinking about as I was thinking about, wow, it took us 9 episodes to get here. Was that too long? And I was thinking, why, Laura, why don't you just start where you want people to end?
Yeah, that's a great question. And in fact, I'm a pretty positive person. I like to, people to be happy, be their true self, like we're going to talk about today. So it kind of feels like you just want to bypass a lot of the other parts of this process, especially the painful parts of it. And let's just focus all of our attention on our true self. But unfortunately, the way to truly come back to and reconnect with who we were created to be, our true self, is to actually take care of the pain that's covered us up, take care of the shame that's covered us up. And so we can't just jump from the concept of true self unless we've taken care of the pain that's hindered us from our childhood development of being our true self.
I think that's really good. One of the things that I was watching reading a book on business, because I own a business, so I read a lot of business books, and this guy was describing a lot of what we're doing here, but using different language. And one of the things they talked about is something called fundamental attribution effect. And they had this really long, complicated, way to explain it, but I broke down what they were saying in my words. I wrote fundamental attribution effect is the tendency to ascribe a person's behaviors to their identity. And so much of what we've been learning is that our behaviors aren't who we are. Our behaviors, especially those behaviors that we don't like, those things that we do that we know aren't good things or things that are life-giving, recognize that they're there because we're hurting. And it's our way of trying to take care of ourselves, which leads us into shame, which we've talked a fair amount about. And I think I'd like to start off today with sharing a clip from the master course that, depending on when you're listening to this, has either been released and is available for sale or is soon to be released and is available for sale. But the master course is essentially Laura going through the compassion method in six sessions. And it's really cool because it's live. And she's working with a live audience over a Zoom, but a live audience that's asking real-time questions, and she's giving real-time answers. And the question and answer, especially, I think, helps pull a lot more of Laura's magical powers out, I guess is how I could describe that. But
Yeah.
I want to share just a response to a question.
So what happens is we don't know how valuable we really are. And so part of it is just being a people person, extrovert. I'm also more extroverted and more of a people person. And I was raised in a big family, got married really young, had a bunch of kids. I spent majority of my life with people. And about 8 years ago, I felt like I was supposed to go away by myself for the weekend. And it was terrible. I love being with people, and I've been with people my whole life. And so this is like a muscle that I haven't developed. So I went away, was there for 2 nights, 3 days, and I was driving home, and I so wanted to put a bow on it and just be like, okay, I went and did what you're supposed to do. I went and did my alone time. I never want to do that again. I'd much rather be around people. And so I was kind of asking God, to give me kind of a conclusion to it. And what he said, initially I didn't like at all, but then the conclusion of what he said really helped me to start exploring the amazingness of actually being with ourselves. And so what he said, he said, this isn't just the beginning. And I was like, oh no, this sounds terrible, because I didn't want to be by myself like that. The whole time, the whole weekend, I was just like, how do people be by themselves? I feel like I'm talking to myself. I feel like, like there's no one. I'd have like watch a sunset and just be like, hey, self, that was cool. Like it just felt so awkward and so uncomfortable. But then what God said, when it went on to say, really changed how I viewed the value and worth of being with myself. And he said, how in heaven, you're going to worship me. You're going to be with those you love for all of eternity. And I was like, yep, that sounds great. Be with you, be with everyone for all of eternity. That sounds great. He said, well, you're going to be with yourself for all of eternity too. So you better get to know yourself. And I was shocked by that, because I had never considered that I'm actually going to be with myself for all of eternity. And then he went on to say, if I saw you the way you see yourself, I never would have died for you, because I wouldn't want to be with your version of yourself for all of eternity, because you don't know yourself. You don't value yourself. You don't see the extraordinary person that I created you to be. But because I do see that person, I would die for you over and over again to be with you for all of eternity, because of who you are and how there's a whole world inside of you waiting to be discovered for all of eternity. And when he said that, it created curiosity inside of me. There must be something extraordinary inside of me that the creator of the universe would die for me, not just for my sin, not just so that I could go to heaven, but because he wanted to get to know me for all of eternity. And so it put inside of me this desire to start to get to know myself and have value for myself in that same way. So today, am I still a people person? Yes. Do I still prefer many times to be around people and not be with myself? Yes. But I also love being with myself. I'll go for walks by myself for hours and just be enjoying myself and asking myself questions like I'm going on a walk with somebody else. And it's extraordinary. I'm a really fun person to hang out with. I never thought that before. I always thought I was only fun if I was with other people. And if I wasn't with other people, I was boring. There was no value or worth to me. And so as you start to actually really love yourself enough to value your opinion above everyone else on this earth, apart from God, it starts to change how you see yourself. So this isn't just I'm a people person or not a people person. This is, how do I really truly see myself? And that also plays into how we're going to connect with other people and receive love from them. Because if I don't see myself as valuable and I'm the gatekeeper of my heart, I'm not going to open up the gate of my heart, because why would I open it up for others to come into those deep places of my heart when I don't even want to go to those places in my heart? So we first have to go to those places in our heart and get to know ourselves and see the value and the worth in order to be able to properly give ourselves compassion.
That was really rich. And that whole module of number 4. So listening audience, when you get the chance to watch that, it's that whole module was really good. And I think one of the things that I think I wanted to really spend a little time with you is, this can seem like a very daunting task, discovering your true self. We spend all this time focusing on pain and unmet need because it blocks our view, and the pain needs to be comforted, the needs need to be met, which creates the environment for you to be able to actually discover your true self. This can seem like a very daunting task, but let's make it simple. Let's share some simple ways that people can help discover who they truly are.
To speak a little bit on it being daunting first, is just the fact that from a really young age, we're asked, what do you want to do when you grow up? And so we're kind of programmed from a really young age not to say, who are you? A lot of adults don't walk up to a child and say, who are you? And so we don't exercise that muscle of getting to know who we are. We exercise that part of our brain that figures out what we want to do. So I just wanted to share that, just because from early childhood development, it's been programmed in us to be more focused on what we're going to do than focused on who we are. But some real practical ways to connect with your true self, being able to connect with events and times where we feel like ourselves. And we feel like ourselves usually connected to when we're experiencing the right side of our brain, which is joy and wonder and awe, and just those characteristics that allow us to be able to see more of who we are. So being able to connect with those things helps us to be able to identify who we are.
I think you've called these in the past a positive trigger.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That was definitely something that I discovered. It's been quite a few years now, but discovering how we actually experience positive triggers or joy triggers as much as we experience pain triggers or negative triggers. I usually like to say that they are pain triggers versus negative, just because we can really categorize as good or bad in how we are triggered by things. So I kind of consider them more pain triggers and joy triggers. But that's something that a lot of people don't realize, that we're getting triggered in the same way as we are from pain. And in past episodes, we've talked about how we have physical reactions, mental thoughts that we're thinking, and emotions that we're having when we're in pain. And that's our triggered self that is filtering our circumstances and filtering what we're going through and causing us to have physical, mental, and emotional responses. Well, the same is actually true for joy triggers, for positive triggers. And those positive triggers, actually, we feel them physically, we feel them, we have mental thoughts that are connected to being triggered by joy. And we have emotions that are connected to being triggered by joy as well.
So how does that help you connect with who you are?
So when I experience joy and I experience the reaction to joy, those reactions are characteristics or attributes that are who I am. So for example, for myself, when I get triggered from pain, I feel hopelessness. That's one of my main characteristics. That's one of my check engine lights, one of my indicators. When I feel hopelessness, it alerts me, hey, you're in a triggered state right now. So when I have joy triggers, what also happens is I feel hope. And I feel it like just as tangible as the hopelessness I feel hope in a tangible way as well. And so that hope is, when I feel that hope, it feels like me. It feels like coming home to who I really am. It's not just hope as this detached emotion that I'm like, yeah, I'm hopeful for things. I actually can feel it in my being. I can feel it physically. My thoughts are hopeful. My heart feels hopeful. I feel those emotions of hope. And that helps me come back to that is who I am.
That makes a lot of sense. One of the things in one of the materials you had when you were talking about a positive trigger that I read, you asked a question. And the question was, have you ever been so filled with love that you wanted to hug someone? And I thought about that and I was like, I don't know. But then I thought I just had to keep getting littler, keep getting littler, and keep getting littler. Good. And, eventually I found that statement didn't seem so odd anymore.
Yeah. And that's kind of like a trigger. A trigger is I feel so much love, I just want to hug you. It's like almost a knee-jerk reaction. When my kids were little, I used to always say I wanted to like bite their cheeks. I know it sounds funny, but they're just so cute. Like you're so cute, I want to bite your cheeks. And it was almost like a knee-jerk reaction. Similar again to how pain triggers cause us to have a knee-jerk reaction. Love can cause us to have a knee-jerk reaction. Don't worry, I never bit their cheeks, but it was just like this feeling like just love them so much. I wanted to express it in some way.
Well, and you also made a comment to me once that if we weren't so averse to pain, we would be able to experience so much more joy, hope, our true self, because we were created for those things. And when you were talking to me about that, you're talking about our aversion to pain is because obviously it hurts, but we also don't think it can be comforted.
Yep. Historically, for most people, we didn't either our parents didn't know how to help us with it, and therefore they didn't know how to comfort us in it. And so we have this belief system that pain is just going to be this big thing. Like people will say, if I start crying, I'll never stop. I don't want to feel my sadness. Because historically, if they cried, nobody came. And so it does feel hopeless that we're going to be able to comfort our pain. If we knew we were going to get comfort, pain wouldn't be so scary. And actually, pain would be an opportunity for connection and relationship, because then someone would come close to us and be with us in our pain. And that would satisfy our deep desire for intimacy and connection.
That was revelatory to me, because I recognized how much joy I suppressed from my life because I was worried about what would come on the backside.
Yeah. So neurologically, the same circuit in our brain that feels pain also feels joy. So as we protect ourselves from pain and we numb or suppress our pain, we're also numbing and suppressing our joy. If you open up pain You feel joy. If you open up joy, you feel pain. But we're so scared of pain, we don't want to feel joy because what comes up must come down. So we're worried to feel that feeling of joy because then we're going to go back to pain, lack of connection, lack of our needs being met, lack of comfort. And so we'd rather stay numb or neutral than to actually feel joy, which, like you said, is the kind of like the gateway or the doorway to connect with who we really are. So ultimately, because of our aversion to pain, we're actually hiding our true self.
Yeah, we all got to think about that one for a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. It's a good thing that there's like a pause, rewind, come back, because some of those things, if you actually apply it to your own life and the areas that you've suppressed it, you can really recognize the areas in your life that are lacking joy because of our aversion to pain.
And I'm seeing that in my own life to a degree of the pain. Pain isn't so scary anymore, because I know that there's hope in the midst of it, and we always have that because we see, people go through horrible things and we see them come out on the other side of it to some varying degree of coming out. And this process of the compassion method is like, just provides me so much hope, because I know that there is hope, and that there is a process that we can walk through to see the light at the end of the tunnel.
But one exciting thing about connecting to your true self, how we talked about compassion, this intricate part of the compassion method, but we had a whole episode on compassion and what is it, and just the whole,
and what it isn't.
What it isn't, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
It's not pity, it's not sympathy, and just what it is. So if you haven't heard that message, you should go back and, listen to it. But one of the really cool things is when we have pain and we play and we recognize it, we recognize what our need is, and we apply compassion, it heals those places in our heart. Well, another way that we can heal after we've experienced compassion and after we've connected to ourselves, when I'm in my true self, I can actually heal pain, because when I'm connected to who I am and I'm in my joy and wonder and faith and belief and possibility, when I'm in my true self, I can actually have the ability, yes, of course, to apply compassion, but just connecting with the essence and who I am actually heals my pain too. But we have to be able to walk through the compassion to connect with our true self to be able to heal in that way as well.
It really, truly creates an environment of anything is possible.
Yeah, it really does. And that anything's possible allows us to face our pain.
So the one way to help connect to the true self is to basically relive some of these positive triggers, and go minor memories of when we felt filled with joy, when we felt filled with hope or peace. Yeah. And really go on a treasure hunt for those, so to speak. Another way is one that you do that's very foundational with people when you start working with them, that I call the child picture exercise. I don't know if that's the technical term that you call it.
Yeah, pretty much.
Child picture exercise.
Maybe I'll come up with a fancy name later, but that's pretty much what it is.
So why don't you just describe the child picture exercise?
It's one of my favorite exercises, and it was born from my own experience, which I've always really liked that when my life story kind of comes into the compassion method. But it came from me finding a picture of myself when I was 3 years old. And it's super cute picture. As far as I know, there was no abuse, nothing negative. It was just a really life-filled picture, cute little girl. But when I looked at her, I had this aversion to her. And it was so weird to look at this cute little 3-year-old that, as far as I knew, there was nothing negative about it, but I actually didn't like her. And I had this feeling of just wanting to put her away and ignore her. But because it was such a strong reaction inside of me, I was like, something's going on, because why would I have that type of reaction? I'm getting triggered by seeing my 3-year-old self. So then I put the picture on my fridge, and I looked at it for almost 2 weeks. And I would just keep looking at it and keep looking at it, which at the time I didn't know, but neurologically it was gathering data about who that little girl was. And it was also gathering data of the pain that was connected to the trigger or the aversion that I had towards her. After about 2 weeks, I took the picture down and I got my journal out and I wrote who I saw her to be, because I had been watching her, observing her for 2 weeks in a picture form on my fridge, but I was looking at it as my real 3-year-old self. And so I wrote out who she was, and it was really amazing on 2 different things. One, it was amazing to see all the characteristics of who she was and the ones that I actually still live today. And I was like, wow, that's so cool. And then also at the time, a little bit sad. Oh, she also had these characteristics that I don't live today because they got covered up because of pain. And so it helped me realize that there's a lot more to me than I realized. The parts of ourselves that are acceptable, that gain connection and gain to our caregivers are the parts that we're usually going to carry through the rest of our lives. But the parts of ourselves that caregivers didn't know how to embrace or help us with, those are the ones we put away. So I had put away certain things about myself because they didn't serve for connection with my caregivers, my parents. And so it was really exciting to be able to see there's so much more to who I am than I realized before. And then the other part about it was being able to recognize some of my story that was connected to it. What I discovered was part of why I had an aversion towards her is because she was confident to get her needs met. Very soon after that picture was taken, my mom had to be in bed rest with one of my siblings that was in her womb because of some medical issues. She couldn't get out of bed. We couldn't go on the bed because if we shook her, she could bleed and she could lose the baby or lose her life. And so it was it was about, I think, 4 or 5 months as a 3-year-old, not having your mommy be able to hold you. And then my dad had to work all the time. We had random kid babysitters coming in to help us, but we were really without parents for that space of time. And so what I realized, my belief system at that time became, I can't ask for what I need. And the reason why I had an aversion towards her is because she felt wrong to me that she could be so confident to ask for what she needed. And so I actually learned from her that I can actually have needs, that they can be met, because she had not learned how to cover up herself and not be able to get her needs met. And so it was this kind of revelation that I actually needed in my adult life that I wasn't functioning in because my coding said, after I went through that time with my mom not being able to hold me, that no one's going to come. You shouldn't have needs because no one's going to meet those needs. Now I know as an adult, because I know that 3-year-old could ask for her needs, I can ask for my needs. So it actually brought me back home to who I really was before I went through that pain event.
Yeah. So do you think as you were looking at that and feeling the pain, were you feeling the pain of, were you also feeling, were you feeling any shame? Was there anything about that little girl that you didn't like?
Yeah, I didn't like that she felt arrogant almost to me. I know there's kind of strong words for looking at a 3-year-old, but that's kind of how it felt. And she felt greedy to me. Who is she to think that she can just ask for her needs to be met? There's not enough love to go around. There's not enough attention to go around. And she just is so blatantly saying, here I am, I expect you to meet my needs. And it actually made me feel like she was almost selfish. So that's the shame of it.
Because you learned that if you had needs, that would lead to disconnection because you weren't able to get those needs met during that time.
Yeah,
so if you started to express it or throw fits or whatever, what little connection you had was going to go away real fast.
Exactly. And it was really high stakes too, because it was a literal life and death situation. So who am I when my mom could die to ask her to hold me? So that feels selfish and greedy, and you can't ask for that. But I'm 3 years old. Mm-hmm. So I'm learning that it's selfish and bad, and you could actually hurt someone. You could kill somebody if you have a need and you expect them to meet it. So it really makes you hide that need because it actually feels very shameful to expect that when someone could die giving it to you.
Well, and at the same time, as being that high stakes, you need those things in your life, like you need air and water.
Yeah. We need connection, like food and water.
10 gifts, affection. You need affection at that age.
On a physical neurological level, I'm not being held. They say you're supposed to get X amount of hugs a day just to be physically healthy, and I'm getting no hugs because I can't. I probably got hugs here and there, but overall not getting the hugs I needed.
When I did the exercise, it was one of the first things you had me do, and I went through, it took me a long time to stare at that picture before I ever really even connected that it was me. Because at first it was is that really me? Yes, it is. But then you realize that, well, it's still you, like you did. You looked at the picture and you realized, well, that's still me. I can have needs and I'm worthy of having them get met. So I was similar where I stared at a long time and then I made the list of words that describe me. And I think as the exercise goes, you underline the ones that you feel still describe you. So then I was looking at the ones that weren't underlined anymore. And one of the ones that jumped out at me was the word sweet. So as a little kid, I was very sweet. Well, actually, evidently I still am. Okay. So I don't connect with that word as much today as then, but in my environment and just, being a boy or whatever, that sweet was not like, it was okay maybe when you're like a real baby, but then you got to quickly grow up and be a man. And then it really kind of stacked on my other pain of being so little and just being so tiny and late maturing and all of that. So then you throw sweet on top of that. It just makes you even feel like more of a failure of life.
Yeah. And then you get bullied sometimes, or people, you really hide that part of yourself.
Sweet doesn't do very well on the playground,
No, it does not. Yeah. Especially being
sports,
a boy or a man. Yeah.
Yeah. Any of that stuff. So really, because that led to disconnection. So I definitely put that part of me away. And it was interesting because this kind of ties into something I want to talk about too, of a repair strategy of basically, you recognize when you feel hopeless, that you're triggered, because that part of just who you're created to be, part of your true self is like you have an extra degree of hopefulness. You know what I'm saying? And you express hopefulness in a unique way that, all of these things, all of these gifts that we have, we all express them in a unique way. So much so that if we don't express them through our true selves, nobody else that ever is created will, and nobody that's ever lived before us ever has. So the world just misses out on that you expressing hopefulness through Laura Duncan, me expressing sweetness through Brian Freise. The world just misses out because nobody else can duplicate it.
It like lays dormant. It's still there, but it lays dormant.
When you find yourself in this hopelessness area, what are some ways that you can bring yourself back to yourself?
Of course, like we've talked about in previous episodes, of being able to walk through our pain and go through like the remote control exercise that helps me come back to who I am. So that's one way, of course, to do it. But I also, how you mentioned before, I also like to remember times that I felt those characteristics of who I am, so I can come back to, oh, that's who I am. And so that's really, really helpful process. But then also being able to, just like with the childhood picture homework and how you have that list of who you are, I also recommend putting it somewhere where you're starting to see those characteristics on a daily basis, where you're able to really see who they are. Not because we're trying to like prove to ourselves that we're there. Because sometimes people get in front of a mirror and they'll be like, I am hopeful, and you're like trying to tell yourself that you're those things.
One big difference between what you're doing and that is that it has substance, because you actually went back and you saw it in you.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. You experienced it. Yeah.
You saw it in that
word.
picture.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You recognize it was covered up, but it's there. So that's a huge difference. And you described this process to me. It's what you're saying, but the word you actually use is writing a script.
Mm-hmm. Yep. The script is really powerful.
The sweet is part of when I find myself in grumpiness or irritability or not acting sweet.
Yeah.
The script I've written can help like, oh yeah, that's not who I am.
Yeah.
There's something else going on.
Kind of two different scripts, one being the compassion script, where you can have multiple different things that you can say to yourself to give yourself compassion. But this is kind of like the true self script, where you're reminding yourself of who you are. I think there was that movie, I forget, it was called The Help or something. And the nanny would like say like, I forget exactly. It was like, you are smart,
you are kind. I think it's you are kind, you are beautiful, you are strong, something like that.
Yeah, exactly like that, like those characteristics. And so what she was doing is she was reminding that child of who that child was on a consistent basis. So that child is growing up. If we go back to our coding, unfortunately, we have pain coding that says no one's coming to comfort you, et cetera, et cetera. But we also have coding that we can go back and remind ourselves of who we are then, so that we can remember who we are today. And that script's really powerful. One thing that you want to do when you are remembering is you want to not just be telling your adult self that I am the characteristics, I am sweet, I'm hope, I am whatever that you've connected to. You also want to be able to be reparenting and reconnecting to your child self, where you stop believing you were those things. So like in your case, for example, you were sweet to some, you felt the connection of being sweet with your caregivers up to a certain age. I don't know what the age was, but at a certain age, you no longer felt like that was acceptable, that was going to bring connection. So we want to go back to that little boy. Let's just say at 8 years old, you decided to put sweet away. We want to go back to that 8-year-old Brian, and we want to be able to remind him of who he is, just like that character in that movie was doing with that child. Because if you just try to white knuckle it as an adult and you haven't made that connection, you can say it till you're blue in the face, but you're not going to be able to live it until your coding says to your 8-year-old, it's okay to be sweet. In fact, it's important for you to be sweet because that's who you were created to be.
Yeah. So the child picture exercise, actually, you can get that access to that on the Triggered and True website. You can just fill out your email address and that'll get sent to you. So that to me was the icebreaker of this process, because I felt like I was hearing your material. I had gone to a couple seminars and maybe had a one-on-one session. I was hearing your material and it was having an impact, but the child picture exercise just took it to like another level to like really prepare my heart that, okay, this is going to be really hard, but it made it so hopeful.
Mm-hmm. And it's really neat too. It's like, yes, when we go back to our child self, we're recognizing the pain, as we talked about in our previous episodes, but it's so powerful to go back to your child self and be able to reconnect in that way, because that is the truest version of who you really are. And a lot of times with people, until they're actually connected with their true self, because for love's sake, not for fixing sake, we can't get very far. Because when we go back to early childhood and we try to bring reparenting, but you don't know yourself, a lot of people don't like themselves, we can't really go very far in reparenting and recoding our childhood because we're not on the same page. And I can't do it for you. So by you connecting to your child self, that allowed you to start to be a gatekeeper, a facilitator, an advocate for you to start taking care of your pain, not just to fix it, but to actually discover who you are.
Well, one other exercise that you had me do, and I know that you have a lot of others do, is an exercise to help pull this out. Because really you're just trying to help pull these things out, because a lot of times we put them away because we're ashamed of them. Like you were talking about, having needs was shameful. For me, being sweet was shameful. So the how am I seen exercise. Mm-hmm. So do you want to just describe that a little bit?
We have people around us that are seeing us in ways that we don't see ourselves. Like, I mean, even right now, as we're recording this, I'm looking at Brian, but I can actually see myself, and I'm seeing myself more than I do on an average day, because I don't normally sit in front of a mirror this long and just stare at myself. I don't know myself as much as most people know me, because I can't see myself from another person's vantage point. So the how I'm seeing homework is being able to send out words that are characteristics of who we are. Again, not what we do, but who we are, and allowing people around you to be able to pick words that describe who you are. And I also have people describe who you are and why, so that you can start to see yourself in a different way than we see ourselves when we're just looking at ourselves usually from shame. So it's actually hindering us from being able to see who we are. So then once the people have given you those words of characteristics of who you are, it helps highlight things that you have maybe didn't see for yourself. The interesting thing about it is all the words that I have people send out are all positive words. But the interesting thing, because like you're talking about, certain characteristics have shame connected to it, that when we hear those words, we don't want to be that word. We're like, I don't want that word. I want to take that part of myself and I want to put it away, because that word is actually causing me to feel triggered, feel pain. But it's really interesting how sometimes people, like 3 people will give the person the same word. So, and I ask people, like, send it to like a variety of people, send it to coworkers, family members, just random people, so that you can get a bigger view of who you are. And it's really interesting to have random people in people's life all saying the same word that person doesn't want to hear because of the shame connected to it. But the beautiful thing is, as they get tender with their heart, they're recognizing that is who I am. And they're able to come home to it, because the good news is we've never lost ourselves. A lot of people go and do these, midlife crisis things, or they go and try to find themselves because they feel like they lost themselves. But we're only covered up. Every characteristic of who you were created to be is already inside of you. It's just covered up. So all we're doing is uncovering who we are. We're not trying to go find it out in our external world.
One of the words that when you had me do this exercise that came back was from several people was the word visionary. And I didn't like argue with the word, because in my knower, like I knew that, yeah, I have that. But one of the things I recognized that really was stifling me from being my true self in that area was my lack of a hope. My outlook of the future tended to be more on the fatalistic side than on the hopeful side. So it's hard to be a visionary when you don't have you think that something bad's always going to happen.
Yeah, because even if you can see it as that's who you are, you don't do anything to get there because something bad can happen.
So then when you start to have visions and dreams about what like my company could become, or what you could accomplish in life, or just dream about things, you shut that stuff down right away, because you're just like, well, it's not going to happen. It's scary. It's whatever. But one thing I've really recognized as the pain behind that, and being able to identify the source of where that's coming from, and bringing comfort to that, is really helped me to just open up and
which
dream.
Is really evident in your life. I mean, Triggered and True, this podcast everyone's listening to right now, is a big part of it is because you were connected to being a visionary and you were able to see where this could go and made it possible. So, I mean, it's amazing what can happen in your business with this, with anything, with your family, when you're able to be who you are as a visionary.
Well, and it really just makes you think of just humanity, how much wonderfulness is just buried.
Yep. How much limitations are because it's buried. Yeah.
Yeah. So from your personal observation, do people just thinking of, this is a really broad statement, but like humanity in general, and from the people you've worked with, do we live more of our lives from a place of our triggered self, or do we live more of our lives from our true self?
I would say the average person definitely from triggered self. And sadly, not even realizing it's triggered self, because we've adopted a lot of beliefs about ourselves that aren't true based on our triggers and our pain. And so not only are we living from our triggered self, but we don't even realize we are. Sometimes when people would meet with me and recognize their triggered self, they'd be like, I've been living like this my whole life. I live here permanently. But they actually didn't even know it because they weren't aware of what it was, which means that if you're living from your triggered self, you can't live from your true self.
So essentially what you're saying is that throughout probably since the fall of man, humanity has lived more from their pain and unmet need, which makes sense.
Mm-hmm. When you even on a physiological way of survival. Yep.
But it also makes sense when you look at, the world and world history and the wars and all the things that human beings have done to each other. It really helps put that into perspective and helps.
It does. It's a big why, because people say, I can't believe people act like that. I can't believe that happened. Even right now, history is being made today with a lot of the events that have happened in the last couple of years. And people are wondering how humanity can be so evil, so bad, so wrong. And now we can recognize it's because people are living from their triggered self. So of course they're having those behaviors. Of course the events are happening in the world that are happening because people are not connected to their true self and they're living triggered.
Right. And we know, what we do matters. So sometimes I think people, when you go down this route, they start to think that, well, are you just excusing everyone's behavior? No, what they do matters, and sin is sin. And when we do something that we need to correct, we need to go ask for forgiveness. We need to do all those things. What we do does matter. But one of the things that's the most powerful, there's so many things powerful about the compassion method. But as I've learned to have that compassion for myself, I no longer see my shame. I see the pain behind it. Okay. But what's even as powerful, or more powerful even, is I see that in other people. So, the Bible talks about not judging others. Repeatedly. Well, when you see past a person's behavior and you can start to see the pain behind it, and you see what they're carrying, because you could see that in yourself, you'll start to see it in others. You don't judge others. It just goes away. You start to have compassion and empathy, because it's like, you've been there.
We were never meant to judge who a person was. We were never meant to judge God's creation. We were always meant to judge behavior, not the person. But when my whole life circles around behavior and I see you through the same lens, then I'm going to judge not just your behavior. I'm going to judge who you are as your behavior is who you are.
Well, how would you like to leave this discussion with our listening and viewing audience today, Laura?
What I want to say is, one, connecting to your true self is such a exciting discovery. journey. There's so much, to be discovered in who you are. So instead of looking at it as I better hurry up and figure out how to be connected to my true self so that I can, be able to have these characteristics that we talked about during this episode, instead of hurry up and let's figure out who we are, let's take our time to discover who we are and be able to celebrate and to be able to recognize who we are. So take your time with it. And then the other thing that I would say is that it feels complicated when we're in a triggered state, and it feels complicated when we're in our pain to connect to who we really are. It's more natural for you to be your true self, and it's more natural to be who you really are than it is to live triggered. We were never meant to live triggered, but because it's such a big reaction, it makes it feel like it's so much harder to be our true self. So knowing that after you get past the barrier of the pain that keeps us from being able to be connected to our true self, it's going to start to flow more naturally and become easier and easier for you to be your true self. So just to give you some hope in that process.
One of the things you shared recently also in the master course, I believe you shared about how much energy it takes to live from your triggered self. Takes so much energy. You have all these protectors, you have all these things built to try to maintain that. And I was, when you said that, what really resonated to me is when I used to drink, and how I would work so hard to like maintain that buzz, but not be so drunk that you were a fool, but not be sober, because then it wouldn't be fun anymore. But how you worked so hard. And it was like, I had like in my mind, I had formulas of how much and what to do and all of this. And it was so much work. It was daunting.
Yeah, it really is. And that's kind of what I'm saying in the sense of like, it's easy. It'll feel hard at first, but it's easier to be yourself than not. And when we recognize that as our goal and we get past the barriers are challenging. Once you get past those barriers, it's going to flow. You're just going to be yourself. Look at kids. When they're being their true self, they're just naturally their true self. They're look at me, like they have no shame in being who they are. And the more we connect to ourselves, we will have no shame in being who we are. And we'll be able to live from that place effortlessly, naturally, automatic.
Well, thank you again, Laura, for sharing all of this wonderful wisdom.
Yeah. And thanks, Brian. Thanks for being a visionary to make this happen.
All right. Good deal. And for those that want to learn more, definitely check out the website, and you can download the child picture exercise and you can work through it yourself. And it's a great icebreaker for getting to know your true self. So thank you everyone for listening, and God bless and have a great day. Bye-bye.
If you're seeing this video, you likely know Laura Duncan. You might also recognize me as the co-host of Laura's podcast, Triggered and True. If you have listened to the podcast, you know that Laura has helped me and thousands of others navigate through really difficult seasons in their lives through her groundbreaking life consulting practice and the Compassion Method. As I started learning from Laura, it was not hard for me to see how extraordinary the Compassion Method process that she developed truly is. I am not being dramatic when I say that the whole world would benefit from learning this process. Perhaps the greatest of tragedies is that most live the majority of their lives from their triggered self. That is, they live most of their lives from their pain. Often unknowingly, they are so covered in their pain that they never truly discover or live from who they were created to be, their true self. Many of you who have discovered the Compassion Method likely feel the same way. Because of this, Laura has a long list of people waiting to schedule a session with her. It has long been in Laura's heart to create an online resource to give more people access to her life's work. So this is me sharing with you that we did that. We created the Compassion Method Master Course because we know how valuable the content in these videos and exercises are. These are the actual methods, exercises, questions, and answers that Laura uses in her one-on-one meetings, all wrapped up in one place that can now be accessed by an unlimited number of people. We are currently pre-launching the course and offering an early bird price. For you to get Laura's course for the early bird price or to check out the free resources we already have available for you, click the link below.